Hello and welcome to Up the Villa podcast. This is a special episode welcoming our partners to the channel Against the Odds. I'm delighted to be joined by Aaron, who is the founder of Against the Odds. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about his background, what Against the Odds is all about. We're going to get into a little bit about the shirt sponsor. And we're going to talk about a couple of other things as well. So how are you, mate?
I'm very good, mate. I'm very good. And it's great to finally be on the channel. Thank you for having me.
I know. I've mentioned you a couple of times. So now it's all about sort of like understanding a little bit about what you are and everything like that. So just talk to us a little bit about your background.
So where do I start? So in terms of my background, mate, so I started gambling at 16. Left school, wasn't very good at school. Didn't get the GCSEs to stay on at sixth form. Ended up going to college, and then a couple of friends introduced me to a bookies when I was 16. I looked like I was in year 11, year 7, so no problem with ID and all that. Went into the bookies, mate, lost a fiver at 16, and then from there, really, it just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled out of control. I'd say I was probably a gambling addict by the time I was 19, 20 at university, say 19. Ended up pulling out of university, going into the world of work, started earning more money, started gambling more. What started off as just sort of betting £5 on roulette machines and on an accumulator, then turned into £1,000 doubles and just stupid bets, mate, about things I had no idea about. And that sort of carried on, mate, from the age of 16 to about 28, 29. Throughout that period, I think it's probably worth mentioning as well that some of the mental impacts, physical impacts that I had from addiction, the financial element of losing all my money, being paid, losing all my money and going through that circle, taking high interest loans. And then it was actually at the start of lockdown. I was reading an article about somebody that committed suicide. And the article was very similar to reading about myself, apart from the suicide element. So I requested all my data from the bookmakers using a specific company, and it come back and I'd lost 263 grand, which was bottom line from the age of 16 to 28, 29. And then I thought that sort of got me thinking, mate, around, yes, I'm a big enough man to hold responsibility. It was my actions at the end of the day. But at the same time, there was no educational piece throughout school, college, university, playing rugby or cricket at a fairly good level. No one ever actually come and told me about the gambling industry and how they advertise and how they market and what's a good customer to them and a bad customer. So considering we advertise gambling 24/7 as a country, whether you're watching sport, you've got Talk Sport on the radio, you walk past, you go to the gym and you have to go past so many bookies to get there. It's everywhere. So I think it's only fair that we try and do as much around the educational and awareness side around the gambling sector in the UK. And that's how Against the Odds was born, really, mate, from that.
Yeah. So before you mentioned lockdown and you mentioned like taking that moment to sort of like check how much you'd lost, etc. Was there anything that sort of did trigger it in your mind that you sort of needed to have that look?
I knew, mate. I knew I was a gambling addict. I couldn't stop. I tried to stop 20, 30 times. Would stop for a week, 2 weeks, even for a month sometimes. Then I'll find myself back on the roulette machine or back online under a fake account or someone else's account, sending money to someone to bet for me. So, I knew I had a problem from the ages of 21, 22. But as with most addictions, the stigma that comes with addiction as well, I've had a good job for the last decade in recruitment, where I've worked my way up sort of the ladder in recruitment, if you like. So I've always earned good money, but I've never saved anything. I've always give it all to the gambling industry. So, yeah, I knew, mate. I knew years ago. But I'm obviously in a very different space now to what I was back then. I was punching myself in the head, pulling my hair out, smashing up bus stops. Instead of talking about the issues I had and trying to deal with it firsthand, I was sort of just keeping it to myself, mate, and then letting all my aggression out at the wrong times, and I was dealing with it completely the wrong way. But I'd say, to be honest with you, mate, the main reason why I started it was reading that article, because it was just like reading about myself. As I said, apart from the suicide element, I was reading it thinking, this is just like me, this is. And thought, you know what, I've got to do something about it. I'm nearly 30. even though I've been earning 50k, 60k for the last 5-6 years, I can't even get a mortgage because of the trouble I got into from gambling previously. So yeah, I knew I was an addict, mate. But there was one thing, realising you're an addict, and then secondly, doing something about it and trying to put something into action, really.
Yeah. So Against the Odds was born. So talk to me about how that was sort of set up and what it is and what you offer.
So it was set up. I spent the last year in my recruitment role, where I still am now until the end of this year. Then I'll go full time with Against the Odds. When I was going out on meetings, I was meeting with sort of senior leaders from colleges, so your principals, vice principals, etc. And every time I'd go out on a meeting with my day job, I'd sort of bring up the idea of Against the Odds, and everyone I met was like, "You really need to go for it. Just do it. Just do it." So put a board together of people I've worked with before, some teachers, some friends, etc. Started putting together content, so presentations around my journey as a recovering gambling addict from leaving college and from when I was a gambling addict. How the gambling companies advertise, market and sponsor, identifying a problem, the transition of social gambling to problem gambling. And we try and cover as much content as possible within about an hour 15-minute presentation. And we've got 5 or 6 different presentations that we deliver to different end users. So we've got one for elite sports, first teams, girls and women in sport, post-16 colleges, elite academies. So there's a load of different presentations that are slightly different and tailored to the end user. But for us, it's not me going out there and saying, don't gamble. No one should gamble, because that's not what we're about. It's not a crusade against the betting companies to say, don't work with them or don't give them your money. All we're simply trying to do is just educate people and make them aware, firstly, of the dangers that can occur when your social gambling does transition into a problem. And then secondly, the awareness piece, which you kindly modelled our home shirt a few weeks ago. And the awareness club's all about raising awareness of problem gambling within 16 to 24-year-olds. So I officially set the business up August last year, but a year prior to that, I was out sort of making things happen and getting things going. And even since January, mate, I've had like over 50 messages from people just in the automotive construction engineering sector that are between 18 and 24 that have said, can you help me or point me in the right direction? My gambling's got out of control. And these are young people that need support, but it's realizing that there's a problem a lot sooner down the line than me, for example, getting to 30 and then kicking something into action. So yeah, for us, mate, it's all education and awareness, really. And it's making sure that as we continue to advertise gambling all the time, that we're putting sort of preventative measures in there as well to try and combat addiction, and just make people aware, mate, of what can actually happen from gambling when it gets a bit too much.
Yeah, and I think it's, I mean, education in everything is always so important, isn't it? Because you'll probably have people listening to this episode now where, you know, they'll stick a fiver on an accumulator each week, and that's all that they ever bet. But then you might have somebody who's chucking a lot more money. And I just think that sort of education side of things, especially to younger people as well. I mean, me and you, we've both got young children, and I think, you know, it's all about educating younger people as well and just showing them that, you know, things that can happen in life. So I think it's really important, and I think it's fantastic what you do, and fair play to you, mate, because you're absolutely smashing it. And I think, again, like how you're sort of saying that you're going to be sort of like leaving your job and going full time with it as well. And I guess like years ago, you know, even in lockdown, when you first started researching it and stuff, you'd have never imagined that you'd be going like full time with it, would you?
Mate, if I'm honest with you, I've set it up initially to help myself stop gambling. And I thought in my head, do you know what? If I can go and deliver about, not how unsuccessful I've been, because I've still had elements of success throughout my career, but if I can let people know earlier on, while they're still between 16 and 24, about what can happen at the end, then to try and put that preventative measure in place, mate, is all I can do from my end, really. But yeah, mate, I set it up thinking it would help me stop, and it might just take up weekends and evenings. And then fast forward sort of 2 years, and we're delivering remote sessions to American high schools. We've worked with the NFL Academy, which is the top players in Europe and Africa. A lot of them are now going on to play Division Division 1 college football next year, Barnsley, Sheffield Wednesday, various colleges, training providers, etc. So yeah, mate, it's going really well. And I think the one thing that's really took me back is if you remember sitting in a presentation when you were at school or college, a lot of the time you're on your phone, you weren't really listening, depending on what the subject was, obviously. But the engagement and the response I've had, mate, it's been unreal. Like, I had one student recently, I won't say where it was, but he come up to me at the end of the session and said, "You've helped me now understand why my mum commits suicide from gambling." And stuff like that, so powerful, mate. Yeah. It took me back, and I was just a bit like, wow. But if I'm going out and there's one student that takes something away from it, whether that's they're helping understand why they've lost a loved one to the gambling sector, or whether that's just making them aware that if you miss a payment on this and you get a default on your credit report, you ain't getting a mortgage for 6 years. So it's not just the gambling side, mate. It's the financial element, it's the mental and physical well-being, and it's also then giving that education around the gambling sector as a whole, really.
Yeah, mate, absolutely massive. So, future plans then. So, what are your future / dream plans? Where do you want to go with it?
I would like to be, in the next 3 years, the go-to for gambling education in the UK. There's a few organisations that are around that are doing something similar to me. However, what I try and do that's a little bit different to them is try and be relevant to my audience. So yes, my audience is 16 to 24. Then don't want to follow an Instagram page that just talks about anti-gambling. So for me, I'm trying to make it relevant through the awareness club with fashion, through different routes of sport, getting some musical artists involved with the awareness club. So trying to make it as relative as possible to the audience, but to become the go-to for gambling education and preventative measurements, mate, in the UK would be the aim over the next 3 years, to be honest.
Absolutely smashed it, mate. So that is basically a background behind Aaron and Against the Odds. So we just thought, didn't we, that it would be, nice for you to come on and explain, because everybody sees the partner at the top of the corner of the screen. So now everybody can get a bit of a better understanding about who you are. And I think our partnership is probably going to grow and blossom over the next month / years, etc. So that's all about Against the Odds. So there's two relevant things that I would like to talk to you, and I would like to get your opinion on. I have my opinion on both things, and I guess we'll have a nice little conversation now about the two. Ivan Toney to start with. So for me, I feel like I'm on one of them little scales. Do you know what I mean? Like I can understand sort of the punishment.
Yeah.
And I can understand how he would need more help, and the punishment is slightly wrong. Do you get what I'm saying? That's where I slightly am, because you've got him how they would know the rules. They would know the rules of what they can and can't bet on. You've got over 200 etc. Incidents, but then he's playing for Brentford with a betting sponsor on his shirt. The guy has got a gambling addiction, and he's having it chucked down his throat, left, right, and centre. He now can't train with his club. He can't do his job. I just feel it's just a bit. The situation just is a bit mixed for me. What are your thoughts on it?
I've got quite strong views on this, mate. I had Ivan Toney as part of my presentation when I first delivered to Tamworth's Academy nearly 2 years, 18 months ago. So I had it as sort of a case study within the presentation. Now, looking at the information that was available back then, you could probably tell he was a gambling addict then, mate, looking at the amount of bets he was placing in a certain time period. So when I think Sky dropped it first saying Ivan Toney's been diagnosed as a gambling addict, but I think that was quite obvious from previous. Yes, he shouldn't be making them bets. I think there's a rule that the FA stimulate. I think it's called E8, which is where you're unable to make bets on the sport you play in within certain leagues, etc. But let's look at the other bans that people have had that are sort of compared to that. I think Cantona for kicking Suarez. Someone. Yeah, we had Luis Suarez got 6 games for a racist comment, I think. We had Adrian Mutu, got 6 months for cocaine. So Ivan Toney's at the top of that bracket in terms of the ban. Which for me straight away doesn't set a good precedent. Yes, you shouldn't be gambling because you know the rules, but you can't give them a longer ban that someone that's done cocaine and someone that's been racially abusing other players. So for me, that doesn't make much sense. And then, like you say, it's a little bit hypocritical from the Premier League, in my opinion, to this guy's got a gambling sponsor when he trains. He's got it all around the ground. Chances are when he's playing a game against most away teams, they're also going to have a gambling sponsor here. So I think there needs to be, I don't know what's been offered to him in terms of support from the Premier League. However, you would expect to see some support offered to him, mate, given the fact that he's now been diagnosed as an addict. And the fact that it's everywhere he goes. He can't go to work and not think about gambling because he's going to see gambling sponsors and gambling logos quite early on to his working day, really. So, yeah, it's a difficult one, mate. I think you might find people that are in the sort of social gambling category that have no problem with their gambling will say he's broke the rules, simple as that. But for someone like myself that's actually been through the addiction element and is still a recovering addict now, I think there's got to be an element of empathy and support that's given to the player, given the foothold that gambling's got within elite sports.
Yeah, definitely, mate. I agree with you. Let's move on to another sponsor, Aston Villa's kit sponsor. You know, I mean, to start with, it looks crap. That's the starter. It looks crap, don't it? You know, it just makes the shirt look crap before we even get into it. But you know, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on the new Villa shirt. This is a really tricky one for me, mate, because I've had a few comments from Twitter since we've engaged in the partnership. And I've had a few people email me about this as well. Now, firstly, I think it's right for me to set on record that I don't agree with any gambling advertisements on shirts. I think even from the 25-26 season, when they're no longer allowed on the front of the shirt, they will still be allowed to go on the sleeves or the back. So I don't agree with any sort of gambling sponsorship on the shirts. I think if we look at the F1 years ago, back in the 90s, they were terribly worried about what would happen if they got rid of their partnership with cigarette brands. It was massive at the time, but the F1 has flurried since then.
It's like, and if you look at Marlboro, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Marlboro on the back of the cars.
And I just think, so to answer your question first, no, mate, not happy about it. Didn't want the club to engage in a gambling sponsor. What I think will happen is I think we'll see lots of clubs utilise a gambling sponsor now up until 25-26. And then we hope to see them disappear from the game bit by bit. But as a Villa fan, no, obviously I'm not happy. And for someone that now runs a gambling education and awareness business, I can't really go and buy that shirt and be seen wearing that shirt with a gambling sponsor on, for me personally. But at the same time, and I know this won't sound great to some of the listeners, but the club is a client to me. I've got work with the foundation in September and then work with the women's first team later on in the year. So I can't probably be as honest as I want to about the situation, but my overall thoughts on the betting logo on the shirt is not happy with it, mate. It doesn't need to be there. The club don't need any gambling ties. And we need to follow the likes of your Forest Green Rovers, Coventry City, and I think there's one other as well that won't have any ties with gambling companies. So, yeah, overall, not happy with it, mate. But at the same time, we're fans of the club. We don't work for the club, so we don't get a say in what's on the front of the shirt. But I would much rather see something that aligns with sort of the modern football shirt, so relate it back to culture, make it a cool shirt. You don't need your gambling sponsors on there. So, yeah, not a fan, mate, to be completely honest with you.
The weird thing about it is as well, these front of shirt sponsors is that it's when I had you as a partner, right? When you first approached me, I was like, oh my God, this is perfect, right? Because me personally, right? I got, and I still get, so many betting companies want to partner or sponsor the channel. They want me to talk about fantasy football, where you can create 5-a-side teams from each team. So home team, away team, you pick 5 players, and then you get points, and it's a pot of money. And there's all of those ones going around. I had another guy the other day message me about it. And for me, morally, I do not feel like it's right for me to ram down people's throats about betting and spending money. And that's just me personally.
Yeah.
And what annoys me about these football betting sponsors is that the club should have the same approach. Football teams should have the same approach. Now, Norwich got rid of this sponsor that Villa had on their shirt for an advertisement campaign that went on years ago. So the due diligence should be a lot better. Now, what's happening with these betting sponsors is they don't pick Aston Villa. They're not looking at Villa thinking we want to work with Villa. They'd work with anybody. They'd work with any team in the league, and it just feels like for £6 or £8 million, whatever this deal's worth, like, do you really want that? Do you really need it? Do you know what I mean? I just think, can we not just say like, no, let's move away and just pick something that's just feels in line with what's morally right for the club. That's how I feel anyway.
I think a lot of the fan base share them views with you, mate, to be honest. Do you remember the Acorns year when we had Acorns on the front? Oh, what a gesture for a biggest club in the Midlands, a huge fan base worldwide. I don't care what anyone says. We've got a massive fan base worldwide. Do we need to be doing it? No, we don't. For I think it's £8 million.
Yeah.
No, mate, we don't need to be doing it. But unfortunately, Against the Odds isn't at that campaigning stage yet. We are, as I said, education and awareness. And I'd like to mention a couple of companies, Gambling with Lives and The Big Step. So The Big Step's owned by a fellow called James Grimes, and they campaign against football advertisements. And they're a brilliant, brilliant cause, mate. So there's a company called Gambling with Lives. One of their sister companies is called The Big Step. And The Big Step are all about campaigning to kick out football advertisements. And they often do walks from certain grounds to certain grounds. And they'll go to the clubs as they're walking past and say, here's a petition. So many people have signed it. And they've been doing this for years, mate. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to them in case anyone hasn't heard of them. But to answer your question, mate, no, we don't need BK8 on the front of Villa shirts. Thankfully, when we get to the 26-27 season, 25-26 season, sorry, I'm hoping that we're not going to see them at all in any sport. Yes, we'll probably see them on the sleeves and the back of the shirt, but I'm hoping this is the start of sort of sieving away from the gambling companies now. But as a Villa fan, no, mate, I'm not fan of it at all.
Because the other thing is as well is what ideally you'd want from a sponsor is, say for example, I see Villa's new shirt and it could have, say, PlayStation written on the front, right? Could have like PlayStation. If I'd never heard of PlayStation, I'd be like, oh, what's that PlayStation? You have a look, you learn about it, you think, do you know what? I want to be a part of that. I'm interested to see like what. But when you see like BK8, you're like even though it's a betting company, I would never go on BK8. Like, I don't understand what the point of it is. Do you know what I mean?
Well, the thing I've never understood, mate, is you never see a Ladbrokes or a William Hill, do you, on the front of these shirts? You always see a load of companies that no one's ever heard of. But when you actually do the digging and look into it, a lot of these companies are all under the same umbrella, owned by the same person. I know there was something that happened, I think it was last year. Alvin Chow was the guy that has 11 different betting companies under him, under his company umbrella. And I think all 11 were working with 9 different clubs in the Premier League. And he was sent down for money laundering. And I think he's been sent down for about 18 years. So I think a lot of the time it's the visibility and the transparency of some of the deals. So it's these companies that are just popping up that no one's ever heard of. But it never seems to be the big players that we all know. The Paddy Powers or the Bet365s, Ladbrokes, William Hill. It's always these smaller companies which it almost gives you a bit of a, do you know what I mean? You're unsure of it straight from the start.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not too sure why that is happening, mate. But as I've said, yeah, it's a difficult one for me to speak about. But what I can be honest about is that there's no room for it in the game anymore. We're getting to the point now where we're seeing a lot of fans campaign and say, do you know what? We don't need it in the game.
Yeah, definitely. And then finally, you are an Aston Villa season ticket holder. So
I am.
we're sort of in not, it's not pre-season yet, is it? I don't know. I never know what you call this period where nothing happens, but what's your
Pre-season, pre-season,
pre-season? Yeah,
pre-season.
we're back. Right, we're in
pre.
pre-season.
Yeah.
Okay, so how are you feeling as a Villa fan, like going into like next season?
I can't remember ever being this excited as an Aston Villa fan at the end of a season, mate. I don't know what's going to happen, mate. I ain't got a clue. I think the first signing we make will either show a bit of intent or we'll be a bit like, oh. I was surprised we didn't retain Youngie. I thought we were going to retain Youngie for one more year, but with Purslow going, Emery's now got a bigger sort of responsibility within the club. I don't think he's just a coach anymore. He's going into that sort of managerial role, isn't he? Oh, mate, top six. Top six should be superb, isn't it? Top fours, I think it's getting a bit ahead of myself, but let's see what happens, mate. I think of 4 or 5 good additions to the squad. We've obviously got the European draw August.
Yeah.
But yeah, mate, I've never been so excited, bro. I can't wait.
Mate, do you know what the funny thing is, though? Whenever you talk to Villa fans, like, I was in Tamworth the other day, and I was not Tamworth. Yeah, Tamworth, and I saw a Villa fan. And everybody just starts smiling and laughing. Like, do you know what I mean? You mention Villa, and everyone just gets giddy with the thought of, like, a European tour and everything like that. So, yeah, absolutely massive. So that's 26 minutes, and that'll be enough from us for today. But I just want to say thanks for coming on, mate, and cheers for like partnering up with us,
mate. One thing I'll finish with, mate. You've been brilliant as well. I know you get a lot of comments on your channel and things like that, and your viewers and stuff. But yeah, to come back to me when I first reached out to you, and to have, it's rare to find someone like yourself that has been approached by all these gambling companies, and you've sort of stood, you've had your stance. We've come along and you've acted on it straight away. So, yeah, keep doing what you're doing, mate. Look forward to growing the partnership out and seeing you at Villa Park next season. And yeah, thanks for all your support, pal. And cheers for listening, guys.
Mate.
Thank you.
Villa.